By now you know that I graduated from CalArts in 2018, and I started at Disney in 2019, and I quit Disney in 2022 to become an independent animator full-time. So I have a lot of tea, but some ground rules before we get there. 1, I signed an NDA, so I'm not going to be telling you about any of the movies. 2, it's just a job and real people work there, so I'm not going to be telling you about any of the people. And 3, there are a lot of secrets at Walt Disney Animation Studios, and most of them I don't know why we don't talk about. There are no written rules saying that we can't. So I'm going to tell you about some of those secrets today. Now I'm going to move in increasingly scandalous order, starting from the speakeasy to the thing that you all want to know about, Walt Disney's Frozen Head. Yes, it's real. Yes, I know where it is. And yes, if you're lucky enough to get a tour with a loose-lipped person like me, you may even get to see it for yourself. But that's at the end of the video. So let's start at the start. 1, the speakeasy. I started at Walt Disney Animation Studios as a story apprentice. You won't know what that means, and I know that, so here's the basic rundown. A story apprentice is a young person who is hired to be trained and honed to Disney's exact specifications. At the end of your training, you have an opportunity to be hired. Not everybody is hired. When you're in training, your first 3 months on the job are a testing period. You work in a basement pod with 20 to 30 different trainees across different departments in a small room at shared desks that look like this. No one visits you at this point. You and the other 2 story apprentices are matched with mentors who work very closely with you to get you up to speed so you can hopefully be hired at the end of those 3 months. You work your ass off to improve, and if you're hired, you get a pay raise that essentially doubles your salary. Plus, you are given the full title. No longer a story apprentice, you are now a Disney storyboard artist. Plus, you get to move up to the secret 3rd floor, which we'll talk about later, where visitors are never ever allowed. They trust you now, you see. You get to make the movies too. Congratulations. Since you're in a downstairs pod as an apprentice, it's not likely that you're going to meet many, if any, storyboard artists for those first 3 months. But I met one, because he would wander down from the 3rd floor all the way to the basement to help us out as much as he could. This guy, call him Dwayne, is one of the best artists that I've ever met in my entire life, and I'm very, very grateful for all of his help. His art would blow you away, and it's in the art books, so you can go and find it if you like. I'm not going to give you his real name, so just look for the best pieces in the book. Those are Dwayne's. Dwayne was extremely helpful and extremely friendly, and when me and the other apprentices had been on the job for 2 months, Dwayne knew that we were stressed out of our minds. So he told us about the speakeasy. First, Dwayne gave us instructions written on a napkin, and then he sent us down a long and labyrinthine hallway. Now he told us that we would need code names, and he told us that we couldn't lose our cool. When we got to the X on Dwayne's map, we found ourselves standing outside of a maintenance closet. Now, we were sure that we'd made a mistake until my very good friend noticed that there was a scan panel on the door when all of the other maintenance closets opened by key. So we scanned our cards, and the door opened. Now, take a break. I know you're excited. I don't have any photos. I wasn't allowed to take any. Now, this is going to be a running theme through the rest of the video. It would be so easy for me to make up secrets and to tell them to you for clickbait, but I'm telling you every single one of these stories is true. Here's my badge. Here's my desk. Here's my name in the credits of your favorite movies. So you're just going to have to decide. Do you trust me or not? I'm going to need you to use your imagination here. The room was dark. Our hearts were beating fast. It was empty in here and very small. Our eyes were adjusting to the light. The first thing that I saw was a bar table and high chairs and a bar top off to my left. There was music playing, but I couldn't make out the words, so I listened hard. And it took me a second to understand. It was electro swing, but all the lyrics were in Japanese. If you haven't guessed it yet, let me explain. We had just walked in to San Francisco. Yes, San Francisco from the movie Big Hero 6. This bar had hanging paper lanterns, Japanese construction, red lacquer details on the walls, big prints, and the style that looked just like the background art of the film. Plus, there was a little robot bartender who was serving us drinks. Red wine, white wine, a few different beers. Now, before you get crazy, no, we did not get drunk on the job. But we could have. You could order a drink right there from the robot, but in order to do so, you had to first swipe your card and then give your code name. Dwayne's code name was White Rabbit. My code name was Bone Daddy. Now your code name could have been Wonder Boy, perhaps, or maybe Ape Man. It's up to you. Now, this was not the only speakeasy at Walt Disney Animation Studios. If you don't know, there is a long and storied legacy of Disney animators getting drunk on the job. The famous Disney animation desks that were invented specifically for the first generation of Disney animators, those drawer pulls are bottle openers. Again, don't get crazy on me. The entire time that I worked at Walt Disney Animation Studios, I did not see a single person drunk. But if you wanted to socialize after work, or maybe get a drink with your friends on lunch, there were ways to do it. I never found all of the speakeasies, but after I was hired, I did have the great privilege of finding just a few more. Now remember, this is Walt Disney Animation Studios we're talking about. We had access to geniuses and Imagineers and all of the money in the world. So my favorite speakeasy that I ever found was the Snuggly Duckling from the movie Tangled. No, not inspired by the Snuggly Duckling. Listen closely, it was the Snuggly Duckling. I can't say more due to NDA, but I hope you get the chance to see it someday. Now, one thing to note about animators before we move any further. We are just big kids with grown-up money. You've heard of Club 33? There is a subculture at Disney and amongst animators in general of hidden rooms, secret societies, and members-only clubs. We just think it's cool. I haven't visited Pixar since I was 19 years old, but I seem to remember a hidden library there too. I think in a circular room, and there may have been drinks involved as well. I can't say for certain because I just don't remember. But one of my Pixar friends, please comment and let us know. I'm sure we're all dying to hear. Because animators love a secret. Like the third floor. I cannot tell you about the third floor, but if you ever visit the studio, you will quickly see that the entire third floor is under restricted access, and you will not under any circumstances be allowed up there unless you are a storyboard artist working a Disney storyboard artist job. And that's because the third floor is where the movies are made. This process is called development or pre-production, and when I graduated from the basement, this is where I went to become a full-time storyboard artist. And here's where my NDA really kicks in, because this is where all the unannounced movies live. On the third floor is all the top secret information for the movies that are in development, plus all the storyboard artists who are working on those movies, plus the entire art department who is also working on those movies, plus the super huge secret story rooms that have all of the information for all of those secret movies that are currently being made. Now you will almost definitely never get to go into one of those story rooms unless you one day work for Walt Disney Animation Studios, which, hey, I believe in you. But for now, here's an artist rendition. Huge screens for pitching, giant printouts on the walls, snacks all over the place to keep you fueled, plus comfy couches, giant printers, and the most beautifully decorated offices you've ever seen in your entire life, huge windows, a big puzzle, plants everywhere, and life-size figures of the characters from the movies. And of course, another bar. We're making movies here, people. Of course, the artists have to be well taken care of. Without us, there are no movies. Okay, you with me? You still listening? Because that was the light stuff. And now, we get to the good shit. Number 4, the secret tunnels. Before we get to this, we have to review your animation history. You're watching this because you're a Disney fan, right? So you've definitely seen that movie, The Reluctant Dragon, the live-action film that explains the entire animation process from beginning to end. If you haven't seen it, don't worry. I considered myself a big Disney fan, and I'd never even heard of this movie until I took the animation history course at CalArts. But you should watch it. It's a lost gem. The Reluctant Dragon is a 1941 feature film where the main character has an idea that he wants to share with Walt. So he visits a bunch of different departments across the studio in order to look for Walt. They include life drawing, storyboards, scoring, Foley, animation, maquettes, ink and paint, and others. And all of that still exists, but not in the way that you think it does. All of the Walt Disney animated features since 1994 have been made in a different building than the one shown in The Reluctant Dragon, a new building, and you probably have seen this building before. It looks like this. It's referred to as the Roy E. Disney Building, or colloquially, the Hat Building. This building was built in order to hold all the new equipment and employees as Disney expanded and went digital for the first time. Animation used to be made like this, but now it's made like this. And because the switch was made over 30 years ago, a lot of young artists can't seem to comprehend just how crazy involved the animation process was or how streamlined Disney had gotten it over the years. But that's to be expected because Disney invented much of what animation is today, and that is not an overstatement. If anything, it's an understatement. Disney were the pros, and every efficiency was accounted for at that studio. Very briefly, the animation process went like this. An idea was pitched and then developed, sometimes by Walt, but usually by someone else. And when it was accepted, it went down to story sketch. The story artists would write and sketch out the film, and Walt and them would rework it until it worked. And once it worked, those story sketches would go down to the animators, who would then animate the entire film on stacks and stacks and stacks of animation paper. Then the in-betweeners and cleanup artists would finish up the animation, expanding it out to hundreds or thousands of drawings. How many exactly? Well, an animation is 24 frames per second, so calculated out, that makes, in 90 minutes, 130,000 frames. That looks like this, by the way, for one movie. Assistants, or the animators themselves, would then cart all of those drawings over to ink and paint, where they would be outlined, colored, and photographed for camera. But 130,000 drawings is not done by one animator. That would be crazy. So it's not unusual for there to be as many as 50 animators on one specific film. So now you have 50 animators or their assistants carting all of these drawings, stacks and stacks, 130,000 sheets of paper, back and forth to, ink and paint, all the way across the street, outside. And keep in mind, the weather in LA is different now because of climate change. In 2021, Burbank saw 9.9 inches of rain. In 1941, it was 40 inches of rain and wind, and sometimes even snow. As a brief aside, in 1955, when Disneyland opened, Walt complained that seeing his employees dragging full bags of trash across the park really ruined the experience for him. But you never see that in Disney World, because Walt fixed it for his second park and for all parks thereafter. But how did he do it? Well, many Disney fans already know. A secret network of underground tunnels. But where did he get that idea? And how did he know it would work? That's right, he had done it before. There is a secret network of underground tunnels underneath Walt Disney Animation Studios. The Hyperion Studio, the original studio before digital, when carrying stacks of paper by hand was necessary to transport to ink and paint, was built over an extensive system of underground tunnels. The animators would then carry their stacks of paper down those tunnels so that they could never be damaged by inclement weather or accident. When Walt picked up Hyperion Studios and moved it to Burbank in 1940, the underground tunnels came too, and you can see them, as a matter of fact, in some of the movies made at Walt Disney Animation Studios. But quickly, while we're here, let's follow those papers even further. Once the films were done, what happened to those 130,000 drawings? Well, Walt was a businessman first and foremost. Shredding would be stupid. If he kept on building the way that he was, each of those 130,000 drawings would one day be worth thousands of dollars, if not millions. So what's the solution? Well, where do you put dead things in storage? That's right, in the morgue. Down in the extensive tunnel system is an area called the morgue, and you can still visit it today. See, something you may not know about being a Disney artist is that when you sign the contract in order to begin working for the mouse, you actually sign away ownership to anything you create while on Disney property or under Disney employ. No, I am not joking. That's actually standard across all animation studios. There's workarounds, and for most things, like a comic or a graphic novel or a side project that doesn't involve a competitor, your studio is likely to look the other way. But that's another topic for another video. Let me know if you want me to get into it. Now, people ask me all the time if Disney really does have risque drawings of all of their characters done by the official Disney artists. And the answer to that is no. That would be crazy, because we don't do risque drawings at Disney. That stopped a long time ago. Now, those drawings exist in part, but they exist from a time where Disney was a private company run by mostly men with overall a more lascivious vibe in general. It stopped way before Disney became the squeaky clean, publicly traded, family-friendly company that it is today. But Disney does keep all of your drawings. But where do those boxes and boxes of drawings go? Straight to the morgue. Now they call it the Animation Research Library because it has gotten so big in the 100+ years that Disney has been in business that it simply can't be contained in the secret tunnels under the studio anymore. They need an entire building off campus in a secret location where it can't be found or vandalized or destroyed. I have no idea where it is, and you will not know either. When they take you in a van that departs from Walt Disney Animation Studios, and I've heard rumors that they blindfold you when you're in the van. But I do have some friends who have gone, and they claim that it's one of the most amazing and inspiring places that they've ever been in their lives. So if you ever do get to go, consider yourself very, very lucky. Because remember what I said in part 1 about the speakeasy? Animators love a secret. You simply cannot resist. And now that I've set the stage, it's time for us to talk about what you really came here for. Walt Disney's frozen head. Now, I'm not going to get in trouble for telling you this because it wasn't on the NDA, but there is kind of an unspoken rule amongst animators where we just don't talk about this. So I'm not committing a crime here, but I am committing a social faux pas. And by the end of this last story, you will understand exactly why. Suffice it to say, this information is nowhere on the internet. You are never going to hear another person talk about this. I have only been shown this once by a CG animator at Disney who was my teacher at CalArts. He invited us in groups of 5 to go and visit him at the studio, and when we were there, he took us in secret to go see the head. He was so casual too when he did it. He took us to go see the entire studio. We visited the whole day. And finally, at the very end, when it was time for us to get back on the van to go back to school, he looked over his shoulder and he said, "Real quick, you guys want to see the head?" Now, we all knew what that meant. There is only one head. But when you enter CalArts, there's kind of a wordless initiation where you start to understand that you will now be privy to a lot of top secret insider information. You're going to meet Glenn Keane. You are going to meet Pete Docter. You're going to go to parties with Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and your friends and teachers are going to grow up to direct Toy Story 5 and The Millers vs. the Machines and unannounced movies at studios I can't name due to NDA. But along with that comes the knowledge that you cannot hold on to childish things anymore. You can't be a superfan. You can't cry when you meet your heroes. You cannot take photos, and you certainly cannot ask about the head. But just underneath the cool exterior of an animator is a kid who never grew up, and animators love a secret, correct? So when our teacher asked us if we wanted to see Walt Disney's frozen head, we all went quiet. We didn't want to take the bait. We wanted to be cool. It felt like a test. But finally, one of us broke, and we were all glad that they did, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime chance after all. And if Walt Disney's frozen head really existed, we were not going to miss that chance. The teacher smiled. Then he took us back across the street to the old Hyperion lot, and he took us down the secret staircase into the network of underground tunnels. Have you ever played the Slender Man game? Or that terrifying Squidward game? Or any of the other hundreds of maze creepers out there? That's the vibes that we're working with here. Dark, flickering lights, boxes pushed up against the walls, exposed pipework, unmarked doors, the word morgue painted in a fading script with an arrow pointing its way down the hall. You'd imagine that if Walt Disney's head was frozen in order to reanimate it someday in the distant future and retake the company, it would be in a multi-billion-dollar bunker with 24-hour security and cryogenic enhancements at the very least. But somehow this made sense. Walt was a very nostalgic man. We know that because he modeled Main Street, USA after his hometown of Marceline, Missouri. So what better place for the head than the morgue, where he could be surrounded by his legacy for all of eternity, and no one would ever think to look for him. Hiding in plain sight, as they say. Those were the thoughts in our head as our footsteps echoed off the concrete walls. And finally, we stopped in front of a door that looked exactly like all of the other doors, and our teacher opened it. Inside was just stacks and pallets of old stuff, storage and paper and boxes, but way in the back in the farthest corner, there was a kind of circular chamber. Not the kind that you're thinking, not like in a sci-fi movie. It was iron, with rivets, a little rusty. But this made sense too, because Walt didn't die in a sci-fi future. He died in 1966, 50 years before this story takes place. And beside the rusty iron chamber, there was a peeling piece of paper. And on the front of the rusty iron chamber, there was a door. Our teacher made the shh sign at us, and then he walked us slowly down this circuitous little path, barely a foot wide, until we found ourselves standing in front of the rusty iron chamber. And now finally we could read that peeling piece of paper. It had an arrow, and beneath the arrow, it read, "Walt's frozen head." The teacher looked at us again, and then he motioned towards the door. And we stood there for a long time, until the bravest person in the group, the same one, reached out and put their hand on the handle of the door. And then they pulled, and as soon as they did, a blast of freezing cold air whipped out at us at 30 miles an hour. We all screamed, and the person let go of the handle, and as soon as they did, it was sucked back up into the chamber, and it slammed shut with a bang. And then we looked at our teacher, and he was laughing. And he was laughing and laughing and laughing, and that's when we realized this is Walt Disney's frozen head. It's a prank. It's a joke. It's a light hazing done by senior Disney animators to young Disney animators, brand new, or to CalArts students, because that's what you get for falling for that stupid old urban legend, Walt Disney's frozen head. Of course it's not real. What that rusty old iron chamber really is some kind of air regulation system. I don't know exactly how it works, but it takes the cold air from underground and it transfers it with hot air warmed by the LA sun upstairs. So when you open that door, a blast of cold air comes in and then it creates a reaction that sucks the door back up. Somebody realized that this would be a really funny prank, and they put that piece of paper that says Walt Disney's frozen head, and it's a prank that still works to this day, every single time. Why? Because animators love a secret, correct? So no, the truth is that for all of the secrets that we animators keep, Walt Disney's head is not frozen in the underground tunnel system underneath Walt Disney Animation Studios. It's not frozen anywhere. It would be crazy to think that it was. Walt is a myth, but he was also a man. The whole world mourned his passing in 1966, and some people didn't want to believe it was true, so they invented the myth of the head. And now we all believe it because we want to think that heroes don't die. But they do. When you exist outside of the animation world, like I did for most of my life, or like you do for now, everything that animators do feels like magic. And it is. But magic is only an illusion, and we artists are the illusionists. And the closer that you get, the easier it is to see behind the curtain. Walt died like anybody else. He's buried in Forest Lawn Cemetery, just like many other celebrities of that time. And even if he wasn't, even if his head was frozen, I wouldn't be able to tell you because of the NDA. I'll see you in the next one.